Moving on now to our special focus on Democracy Live this evening. If you've noticed social media the past few days, you would have noticed a series of tweets and Facebook posts by military veterans calling their houses palatial. They're not being literal, they're being ironic, they're being sarcastic. This after the Ministry of Defence has opposed the non-functional financial upgradation, which is essentially a categorization that would bring army soldiers at the same promotional pay scale as other services such as bureaucrats and police officers. The soldiers were angry after the Ministry of Defence went and said in court that the NFU should not be granted to the armed forces and that soldiers live in palatial houses. Beyond this sarcasm, it is important to understand why the ministry would oppose this. In this age of nationalism and even hyper-nationalism, why would the armed forces not be given the NFU tag, the NFU status, the NFU recognition when other services and forces, including paramilitary forces, have been given this by the Supreme Court? To try and understand why military veterans are livid about this, let's introduce our panel this evening. General Atta Hasnain is with us, as is Colonel Ajay Shukla. We're also joined by Mr. C.M. Vasudev, who's of course retired from government, is a very senior bureaucrat. And we're also joined by Colonel Amardeep from Rajasthan, who was one of the soldiers who posted this photograph sarcastically saying, "My palatial house." Now, General Hasnain, I think it's important because it's a technical issue to explain to our viewers why the military is up in arms about this, what they're trying to do with this series of tweets sarcastically saying "my palatial house," and effectively what does this NFU mean? What I understand it to mean is that in the IAS, for example, whether or not you are promoted to the highest rank, you will get a salary commensurate with that rank because of the sort of cap on promotional capacities and opportunities. Here in the armed forces, very few percentage of officers actually make it to the top ranks. So I think the soldiers are saying we still need the same benefits that bureaucrats and police officers get. Could you explain, sir?
Barkha, you've already actually explained it very well. But let me just add to that by saying that the officer cadre of the Indian Armed Forces is what is called pyramidal in structure.
Yeah.
Which means that at every select rank, there's a certain segment, almost 50 to 60% of the officers who get shed at that rank and do not go up to the next rank, which virtually means that by the time you reach the rank of a lieutenant general, 3-star general, virtually in the 1984 batch, which has just been cleared for promotion, has just got 9 officers out of 800 officers who were commissioned in 1984. It is that kind of attrition which is there. The structure of the civil services officer cadres is not of this nature. It is more cylindrical or rectangular in nature. And almost a very large segment of people get a chance to get promoted. Now the irony is that the very structure, the very services where the opportunities for promotion are much higher, there you find a system has been introduced that in a particular batch, if one person gets promoted to a particular rank and starts drawing a higher salary, then within 2 years, all members of his batch must also start receiving the same salary as that particular individual. Which means it's not on the basis of functioning, it is non-functional. But there is a financial upgrade given to that individual based on the promotion of 1, 2 or more of his batchmates. This in a nutshell is what non-functional financial upgradation really means. But let me just add a small bit to it more. The armed forces were also asked during the time of the 6th Pay Commission whether they would probably consider NFFU to be introduced into the armed force. And I think at that particular time, the armed forces were not prepared to really understand what the connotation of this entire thing was. And that the 6th Pay Commission and the 7th Pay Commission would finally end up giving this particular facility to almost every government servant, almost every central government servant who's an officer. Today, the situation has come where you find that officers of the Indian Armed Forces have people who are working alongside them from the military engineering services or the BRO who will probably start drawing or already drawing higher salary. And salary is the basis of status, which means that a person who is senior in rank will be drawing lesser salary in the armed forces than someone from the other services working alongside him, but probably working under him.
Got it. So it's about hierarchy, and it's about monetary recognition, but it's also about rank and status, and therefore how the hierarchy operates, especially perhaps in conflict areas like Kashmir, where you've served. But let me get Mr. Vasudev in. Mr. Vasudev, don't you think that this creates yet another unfortunate confrontation or fault line between the bureaucracy and the military? Point one. And point two, when the Ministry of Defense lawyers go and say in court that soldiers have palatial houses, you've seen this kind of sarcastic pushback by a number of military veterans who are posting their bunkers, their positions at Siachen, icy cold climes, war-torn areas. And it seems to me that the Supreme Court has actually recognized the NFFU for the Central Armed Police Force. They're also making the argument that only 2%, this is the data I have, only 2% of the army will rise to the same rank as that of an IG or a joint secretary, whereas almost all IPS and IAS officers in 18 to 20 years service will reach that rank. Therefore, is there a basis to deny the NFFU to the armed forces, Mr. Vasudev?
Frankly, I am not too familiar with the current policies in this regard. I can only share with you my general understanding of how the system operates and what this means. The thing is that as regards the pyramid structure, certainly it may be a little more acute on the armed forces side, but in the civil service side also, if you see, for example, in the IAS, only 11% or so make it to the secretary's rank, and about 25% make it to additional secretary, and about 50% or so make it to joint secretary. So there is a pyramid there, maybe not as steep as that.
Okay.
But the second point, is that it's very difficult, I feel, for people sitting in the government to try to adjust the salary scales in between different pay commissions, because pay commission is given the terms of reference. It is supposed to take a holistic view of different areas of government, whether it is army or whether it is the defense forces or the scientists or the teachers or professors or the civil servants.
Okay.
What all is the plethora of the government civil and military services. So they take a holistic view, make a recommendation. On the basis of that recommendation, governments take a decision. Now, if some issues come in between one pay commission and the other pay commission, what does the civil servant sitting in the government who is dealing with these matters, what does he do? His main concern is, I think it's not correct to sort of have that impression that they are not mindful or not sensitive to what the needs of the armed forces is. But their only concern is twofold. One is what type of chain reaction it is going to create. Is it going to create a precedent which they will not be able to follow in other areas of government?
Okay.
And what is going to be the financial implication, how affordable or not affordable it is. These are the type of considerations will come to his mind. And also I feel that this pay commission system of having one pay commission for all types of government employees, it's very difficult to compare the responsibilities, duties, risks, and grades and all that, say between armed forces and scientists and professors and civil servants and all.
Yes.
And given the very special nature of the
maybe
armed
they should
forces,
have their own.
It is perhaps a good idea to have a separate pay commission for the defense side.
Well, the military
let them look at it that. Otherwise,
sir,
any pay commission or in government, they tend to compare what you do here with what is going to happen in other areas of government.
I was just going to say the military has been asking for a separate pay commission for a long time, and it is my understanding. Ajay can correct me. So just a minute, let me get the others in. Ajay, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Idea. But the 7th pay commission, unlike the 6th pay commission, did uphold the NFFU for the armed forces. The Armed Forces Tribunal has given a go-ahead for it, but the matter is pending in court. And in court, the Ministry of Defense has actually opposed it, leading to this sort of outburst of ironic photographs that soldiers are posting on their social media pages saying, my palatial houses. Ajay, isn't it ironic that in this age where nationalism is on test on almost a daily basis, the actual specifics, no one wants to talk about those. Nationalism is a big television studio slogan, but nobody wants to talk about the real issues that soldiers care about.
Barkha, just to sort of correct you on one issue there, the 7th Central Pay Commission has not entirely recommended non-functional upgradation. The chairman, Justice Mathur, recommended it, and both the other members, who were Vivek Ray, a civil servant, and Ratan Roy, an economist, a public economist, said it was a bad idea and that even the existing NFU, which was granted by the 6th Pay Commission, should be withdrawn so that equity is maintained. But coming to the real questions over here, there are two issues here. One is the issue of desirability of NFU, whether it should be there or not, and the other is the issue of whether it is possible to implement it, and if so, how. First of all, as far as the desirability is concerned, it runs contrary to all principles of organizational justice, where merit should be rewarded, the better people, better performers should be promoted, others should by a process of natural selection be left behind and not brought up to par with those who have performed better and achieved more than them. But what does NFU actually achieve? With a gap of 2 years, the non-performers catch up with the performers. So in the army, for example, a person who's found good enough to become a major general, who's got the trappings of power, who's got the a flag car, who's entitled to a certain amount of pomp and splendor, he's currently is a symbol of a certain status and performance. How can you put everybody else on par with him with a gap of 2 years? So it devalues performance, it devalues the recognition and reward that should go into a service hierarchy, and in that sense, it's not desirable. Now you come to the question of equity. Should it be there for the military? The problem is you've given it to everybody else. So why should the military be the only people, along with the Central Armed Police Forces, who don't get it? It is a sad thing that the government actually implemented NFU, but having implemented it, it would be contrary to the principles of natural justice to deny it to the most pyramidical of structures, to the organization where Ajay, General Hasnain brought out, the most number of people get left behind.
So Ajay, what I'm hearing you say is that personally you would have liked the competitive edge to be maintained within the military as in all other organizations, but given that this has now been extended to more than 50 organizations, you can't leave the armed forces out. That's what you're saying. You're saying personally you don't actually like the principle of it. You think it equalizes performers with non-performers. Right, Ajay?
Exactly right.
Okay, let me bring in Colonel Amardeep. Colonel Amardeep, you were one of the soldiers, retired soldiers who did post the My Palatial House series. Please respond to Ajay, who says that actually for the military or for any organization, it's not great that if you miss out on a promotion, if you miss out on reaching the top of your pyramid, you actually get the same compensation as the person who worked her or his way up. But having given it to everyone else, the army should get it too. Colonel Amardeep.
Yeah, Barkha, the point what Ajay has made is very, very pertinent. That why you leave out army. Even I am of the same opinion. Please don't give NFU, but then don't give NFU to anybody. But having you decided that we will give NFU on a selective basis, that is wrong. And as if you see 50% of the armed forces officers do not make it beyond Lieutenant Colonel, that means you are actually, the pyramid is so steep that you are denying the first promotion itself to the 50% of a cadre.
Yeah.
So if you see who deserves it, armed forces officers deserve it if others deserve it. If there are financial constraints, then please remove it from across the board and do not give it. This is me sitting on glacier. What hurt me was, why I was posting this picture was, when I heard the MOD lawyers giving this statement in the court that armed forces officers are living in palatial houses. I said, no sir. You see us in peace station, what you don't see us in where we work. Nobody is there.
Yes.
Only I am there and my camera is there. So I thought it is now right on my part to tell people that everything is not hunky-dory.
Yes.
We also face difficulties, and if you see the difficulty level, we are the ones who are facing a difficulty which others won't even see ever in their life.
So what I'm
This was
hearing,
my point.
what I'm hearing both you and Ajay say is maybe this is a bad idea, maybe it's anti-merit, but if every other organization is going to get it, General Hasnain, then why not the military? So I first want to actually go to Ajay's first point, that he doesn't actually think in itself it's a great principle to emulate. And the argument that the MOD has made in court is that the army is, cannot be compared to the bureaucracy because it is much more, in that sense, a cutting-edge organization driven much more by performance than perhaps any other organization. So then, therefore, can you club the military, the bureaucracy would ask, with other agencies?
See, Barkha, I mean, what Ajay and what Colonel Amardeep just said is absolutely the plain truth. And I go back to my original point, which I made, that when the army was offered this in 2000, under the 6th Pay Commission, or not really offered, but asked to consider, the army was very idealistic in its approach towards the whole issue, where it said that merit is what deserves everything.
Yeah.
It is only on the basis of merit that the army likes to promote and motivate its people. And here you are wanting to give everyone the same status, the same pay grade,
yeah,
based on no parameters of efficiency at all. So on that basis, the army did not recommend it for itself. Little did they know that the 6th Pay Commission will go ahead and give it to certain services, and the 7th Pay Commission will expand this to almost everyone except the CAPFs. Yeah. And the CAPFs have now gone and got this through the route of the Supreme Court.
That's right.
Now, I don't understand today on what basis can the MOD argue in a court today and talk the most ridiculous things, the most ridiculous rationale to say that the armed forces do not deserve it.
That's
the
right.
privations which the armed forces suffer, no other service, and I can say this with utter candor, no other service suffers that.
Yeah.
Then why should not the armed forces get it? This argument about palatial houses, etc., should actually is the most ridiculous thing, and it just shows the mindset of the people in the Ministry of Defence.
It's actually a supremely tone-deaf comment to make, and highly insensitive. But Mr. Vasudev, I want to go deeper with Ajay's comment that, either nobody deserves it or the armed forces deserve it too. And why should that principle of a pyramidal structure, of merit-driven promotions, of merit-driven compensations not apply to the bureaucracy or to the police forces? Let's take the media, for example. I would argue that it is the best performing person who should rise to the top, and the person at the top should get the highest paid. Now, if somebody else does not reach that particular position, why should they earn the same as someone who's the editor? So why are we not applying the principle of competitive edge to other agencies, the bureaucracy, the police, the IFS?
Well, as I said, that in the bureaucracy at this point of time, as far as the All India services is concerned, the IAS or the IPS or the Foreign Service, to my understanding, there is no concept of non-functional upgradation. It is in the other services, the Central Secretariat services and the other Class 2 and Class 3 services, where this type of non-functional upgradation is there, where they feel that there is a lot of stagnation, and therefore they want to create higher posts, so this is one way to do it. But as far as the All India service is concerned, as far as my understanding goes, this type of non-functional upgradation does not exist. But on the merits of it, I certainly agree with the points that have been made, that they certainly are anti-merit. They do not promote the concept of promotion on the basis of merit. If anybody who is also not considered to be meritorious to get a functional grade, then after 2 years somebody else also gets the same grade, then to that extent you are undermining the concept of merit. In principle, nobody can disagree. And I suppose that is why the 7th Pay Commission did recommend that wherever it exists, that should also be discontinued. But for whatever reasons, political or otherwise, government has not been able to do it, because I think it is applicable to a large majority of the civil service workforce, which are Class 2 and Class 3 officers, and not the All India services. All India services do not get this type of non-functional upgradation.
Let me get clarity on that. Let me get clarity on that from Ajay. It is a highly technical sort of issue, and we do want to get our facts right. Ajay, let me just bring you in on this, because do you fear, as someone who served in the army, that the army or the military could lose its sort of edge, its sharp edge, if NFFU were actually to be given? And to Mr. Vasudev's point that it is the lower services who are actually given this benefit and not the higher services, and therefore for the army to say everybody else is getting it and not us is wrong.
No, actually the IAS, for example, doesn't get NFU. But it's like saying that the king doesn't get a certain allowance that his courtiers are. The IAS constitutes the benchmark against which everybody else's NFU is actually calculated.
Yes.
So when an IAF person from, let's say, the 1979 batch gets promoted to a certain rank, everybody in the other services who are from 2 years earlier, that's the 77 batch, will also start drawing salaries from that grade that the IAS officer has been promoted to. So the IAS only constitutes the benchmark. Everybody else just follows with a gap of 2 years.
Okay.
The people who don't follow, of course, as we've just brought out, are the army, the military. And here there is a sort of serious issue with the nature of the structure in the particular organization. The military cannot actually be compared with the IAS because the IAS has a system of ranks and positions that it occupies where everybody can actually get promoted up the chain. There are those many secretary positions. There are those many additional secretary positions and joint secretary positions to cater for most of the people who come up from director's rank. But in the army, there simply aren't, because as General Hasnain brought out, the number of people who get promoted in a particular batch are very small. So the question that then comes in here is, how do you compensate the ones who get left behind? Because many of them are outstanding officers. Had they been in any other service other than the army, they would probably have shot up the promotion chain. So the question that comes in is, how do you compensate them? And rather than give an NFU, I personally feel that it would be better to compensate them through other allowances, through hardship allowances, through travel allowances and so on, so that they get the benefits but without calling it NFU.
Okay, I just want to briefly take that to Colonel Amardeep, and then we do have to close with the last word from General Hasnain. Colonel Amardeep, would that be an acceptable alternative? That is, it is basically about recognition, and that recognition can come through other means.
Yeah, Barkha, see, it is not only the recognition when you are working together. Otherwise, IAS and army officers will not work together. But in the peculiar situation in armed forces headquarters where they are working shoulder to shoulder, and a person who is 8 years, 9 years junior to you is drawing a higher grade of pay than you, then it certainly hurts. My point is, as I have already made, the most deserving of the people are the lieutenant colonels whom we don't promote to full colonel. And trust me, 85 to 90% people are deserving, but there are no vacancies, and they get left out just by 0.001% loss of merit. That's about it.
I think
Second thing we must understand is that we are retiring at 54, 56, 58 years of age. So there is a gap at the other end of the service, whereas a person in the civil service, any grade, any level, will retire with the maximum pension at that rate. An armed forces officer has to compensate at both ends. Firstly, this is out at first board, and at the other end, he is not getting the full pension.
Okay, I have to close. General Hasnain, I'll let you take the last word. We do have the Colonel Mukesh, who started this, actually going on record to say, I'm now getting death threats. He was hesitant to even come on this program. General Hasnain, the big picture. The big picture, you know, you had the whole OROP discussion, then you had the 7th Pay Commission. Right now, if you had to say in one line, what is the soldier, what is the military vet, what is the Fauji family feeling about this, you would say what?
You see, the army, the armed forces are primarily, Barkha, looking for equivalence. You got to realize this, that in today's world, everything is about equivalence to other services. The armed forces by themselves had lived in a cocoon in an isolated world in the earlier years. But now with all kinds of parameters, the information revolution around us, this is obvious that the armed forces will always desire it. We have got 13 years into it. It's going to be very difficult to roll it back for other services. So the government really has, or the Supreme Court really in this case, I hope, really looks at it in the manner that there is no other option but to also
Yes.
give it to the army, include the army as a part of the overall organizations which are
Okay.
receiving the NFFU.
And irrespective of what the court does decide, and I hope, as you said, that it does decide that, the comments made by the Ministry of Defence lawyers in court were highly insensitive, leading to those slew of photographs by soldiers from their bunker positions and their postings to take a swipe and say, if you think this is palatial, come do our job. Leaving it there, Colonel Amardeep, Ajay, Mr. Vasudev, General Hasnain, pleasure to have you on Democracy Live.